Thank you everybody for coming tonight. My name is Don Morrill and I'm the Executive Director of the New York Technology Council, and I'm very happy and excited to be presenting tonight's event on Cutting Edge Technology Showcase here at Google. For those of you on Twitter, we'll be at NY Tech Council with the hashtag Innovation Tonight. I'd like to start by thanking our 2012 sponsors, the accounting firm of Eisner Amper, Google, of course, the business consulting firm of TGP Associates, Verizon, Information Builders, and I'm very happy to announce that for 2012 we have two new sponsors in IBM and the law firm of Frankfurt Kernet. So thanks to all of our sponsors for supporting us. Still plenty of room up here if you want to talk to me after the event. Also want to give a special extra thanks tonight to Google for hosting us at this great facility. If any of you are considering searching the internet in the coming weeks, I suggest you check out Google. I heard they have a pretty good product. And that's all I have. I want to get straight into our agenda. We have a lot to talk about tonight. We have 5 great presenters and our keynote, Rick Karr. And so this is the order of operations tonight. I'm going to invite Rick up to say a few opening remarks, and then I'll leave it to him to hand off. And please bear with us as we swap laptops in and out and projectors. It won't be as bad as last week for those of you that attended last week's event. But please bear with us while we swap in and out laptops a bit. So Rick, I'll ask you to come on up.
My name's Rick Karr, and I am here mostly because I did a local public television show that aired last year called NYC 2.0. It's very rare in a journalist's life that you talk to an executive in charge of a television station and they say to you, "What kind of show do you want to do?" And I said, I would really like to do a show talking about technology here in New York City. This is for WNYE, Channel 25, the city-owned public television station. Diane Petsky, the sort of executive in charge there, is somebody who I'd known for a while. She thought it was a great idea, but for a couple of years it didn't come together. But then the city found some money, and Diane called me and said, "You can do your show." And so I had the great opportunity running around the city with a producer and my cameraman and editor, Billy Pena, who made a big difference in the way the show worked. Just looking at different, the way that the tech scene in New York City works. And I want to show you how we sort of like started out conceiving of it, because we didn't really know what we were going to do at first with NYC 2.0. So what we ended up with was shooting just a trailer for it. So this gives you a sense of like what we were thinking in the beginning. Maybe the next Steve Jobs is working in a loft in Bushwick trying to completely change the way we think about computers. Or maybe the next Sergey Brin and Larry Page are working at a cafe in Manhattan, getting ready to reinvent everything we know about the web. Actually, there's no maybe about it. All over the city, people are working on technologies that are going to change what it means to live in New York, from how we get around to what we wear. They're inventing the next version of New York City. I'm Rick Karr. Join me this fall as I take you on a tour of NYC 2.0. Now that you've seen sort of a sense of where we thought we were going, I want to tell you what we actually learned. A couple of things. If you're interested in seeing the show, you can watch it online either through the city site. Jorge, and nyc.gov/VOD, and all 6 episodes are up there. You can also get it through the iTunes store as a podcast. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that interested me most, and that I think that those of you who are working for startups and in that community might not necessarily be seeing all the time. I don't know why this grid showed up over Josh Topolsky and Nilay Patel's names. It just randomly showed up. But any of you who keep up with the old web, or kept up with the old website Engadget, Engadget's still there. Josh and Nilay were the 2 top editors there. They left early last year. They left the AOL fold to start The Verge, which is their new tech news website, which is funded by SB Nation. Josh is an old friend of mine, and he said to me at one point when I said I was going to be doing the series, he said, "You know, I honestly think the tech scene in New York City right now is more exciting and more interesting and more vital than anywhere else in the country. Than out in the Valley, than out in the Bay Area, than on Route 128, than down in Austin, than anywhere." And so I sat down with Josh and Nilay, and this is actually the concluding interview for the whole series, and I think they had some interesting insights into what it is that characterizes the tech scene in New York City.
People have been telling us as we've been making this series that there are more startups in New York right now than there were at the height of the Silicon Alley days in the 90s and early aughts. Is there something that sort of characterizes that? Is what's going on here interesting to you guys?
I don't know if that is right, if there's more, but I feel like there are more useful and sustainable or substantial startups here. One of the things I think about when I look at startups, a lot of these people are just weird artists or weird musicians who were like, I had this idea and I wanted to do it and I didn't have a way to do it, so I started this thing. A lot of stuff has started out of necessity here. I feel like a lot of ideas sort of crop up because you want to do something and there's nobody else around who's going to do it. There isn't an industry here the way there is in the Valley, where it's a machine. And I think that actually makes the startups that are here more unique and hungrier.
And I think even the name, Silicon Alley, it was a response to Silicon Valley, right? Let's have a name that rhymes. And now it's a little bit more organic. People are trying to solve problems, and I think they're better at solving problems in a way that makes money, right? And solving a problem in a meaningful way.
It's New York, you need money.
Yeah, right? Whereas in the Valley, it's like, well, we'll have 50 ideas.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of people floating. I mean, that's the thing. You're not just like, well, I'm floating on this idea for a while and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see if I can sell it to
you. People actually trying to monetize stuff really quickly and figure out, is this sustainable? Can I make a living off this? Is this a real business? Yeah, is it a real business? Exactly.
And I think that makes it vital, right? Yeah. I mean, that makes people, you're actually competing to see who can succeed, whereas a lot of the stuff we cover in the Valley is you're competing to see who has the most outlandish idea that we can build in 24 hours at a hackathon.
There's some incredible, really vital pieces of usable technology being created here, but I still feel like people don't notice that it's from New York. You have to work really hard for people to kind of pay attention.
Of course, one way you can get people to pay attention is to get those guys to pay attention to you. I want to focus on two things that Josh said in there, and these are some of the most interesting things that we found when we were reporting. The first, we used that phrase, weird artists, and it is amazing how many individual creators and innovators there are using technology here in New York, whether they are technologists per se or not. And I would actually say a lot of the most interesting stuff is coming from people who aren't technologists per se. But I want to give you a little trip to, anybody in here know NYC Resistor, the hacker space in Brooklyn? Whoa, very small number. Okay, this is an amazing institution now. It was created by 5 hackers, white hats, not black hats, who just were interested in crazy stuff. And so I want to take you inside to show you a little bit of what goes on there.
When we visited, member Alicia Gibb was trying to build a pair of turn indicator armbands to wear when she's riding her bicycle. To make them work, she needed a custom-made circuit board, so Raphael helped her make it, using NYC Resistor's computer-controlled milling machine. The coolest sound. Alicia told me that this kind of collaboration is what makes NYC Resistor a great place to hang out.
It's one of the beauties of having 50 different people in the group is that we have 50 different brains that we can tap into at any given point. If you're falling short a little bit in one type of knowledge, maybe on motors or circuit boards or something, somebody else probably knows all about motors and circuit boards, and maybe they'll come to you when they need to know something about conductive thread or LEDs or something else.
Resistor's members spend a lot of time just talking, working out ideas, floating crazy proposals, or just shooting the breeze. But when it's time to get to building something, the space has just about everything you might need if you're a creative hacker.
You need a laser cutter? They have a laser cutter. If you need tools, they have tools. If you need a shop, they have a shop. If you need parts, they have parts. If you need one of these, they have one of these. And lots of other stuff.
When we first started,
that's the back room. That's about 1/3 of the NYC Resistor space. Now you might ask yourself, what good is this? What's come out of this? Well, okay, one really cool project. One member has built a 1/8 scale model, working model, down to the bit of a Cray 4 supercomputer. That's the round one that had the bench around it. It's exactly the right size that you can sit a Barbie or a G.I. Joe on it, and it looks like it's scaled to that. He's got the OS going. The only thing that he can't find is software for it because it was used by universities and by the NSA. The NSA says its software is still classified. And the universities have been sending him source code on microfiche. So he's got the working Cray 4 computer, but he's got no software for it. If anybody happens to have any old Cray 4 code floating around, let me know. I can try to hook you up here. Another thing that came out of here, the biggest thing that came out of here, the coolest thing probably and most successful as a business, MakerBot, the 3D printer kit that you can buy for $1,000. They today just announced their new product, about twice the size. Very cool thing. Bunch of guys from NYC Resistor designed and built this thing. They've turned it into a company. They're right downstairs. Super cool. But there's all kinds of this stuff going on. Little groups of people who are not necessarily tech savvy. We spoke with an artist named Tahir Hemphill who's using an off-the-shelf, actually completely open source database system. He's done a full text database of the lyrics of 40,000 hip hop songs. And he's also found open source algorithms to do textual analysis of them, to do things like, what was the average reading level needed to understand a hip hop lyric in 1980 at the birth of the genre? How has that changed over time? It's fascinating stuff. You can even do dumb stuff like which champagne gets name dropped more on the East Coast or the West Coast if you want. But this guy's an artist. He's got a background as a printmaker and a sculptor. But he's fascinated by hip hop and the technology was there and he learned what he needed to do this. So this is kind of some of the stuff that Josh Topolsky was talking about. The other thing I want to get to though is this idea of stuff that's born of necessity. And one of my favorites in this was Michael Hill. I don't know if anybody in here knows Michael. He's kind of a coder, gun for hire guy who's been involved with actually a lot of transportation apps. This guy named Ryan Respecki who's developed something called Social Bikes. And Mike Hill wrote the app for that. Mike's office is a cafe on the Lower East Side. And that's actually where I met him. I walked in there and he had a Sobe, a Social Bike sticker on his laptop. And I said, oh, you know Sobe? And he's like, oh yeah, and we started talking. And it turns out that he wrote this app, Primo Spot, out of necessity.
You're a lot more hungry here, so you're always looking for new ideas and looking for other ways to generate, you know, the next big thing or the next big project. So
more entrepreneurial.
I think people are a lot more entrepreneurial here than just because people are more hungry and you want to come here and build something. And there's also just a great community of people doing it. There's a lot of startups here, and the mayor's really focusing on trying to generate a lot more business here in the city, and that's one of the major ways is by bringing new startups to the city.
One of the things that Primo Spot started out as, that Mike told me, was that his wife moved to New York. He was from Austin. He was actually working for a big tech company in Austin. He moved up here. His wife moved up, brought her car along, and they were having to do the alternate side of the street parking dance, and they live in the East Village. I lived there. I sold the car after I finally ended up, I couldn't find a space any closer to where I lived than 18th Street. I lived below Houston. I thought, okay, no car anymore. So what Mike started doing was he was using Google Maps, which he actually printed out a Google map of his neighborhood and was using colored pens to mark where the parking times were. And he thought, why am I doing this? I'm a coder. I can, and so he created a Google map where he was putting in the stuff. Then he opened it up and all of his friends started putting in the parking rules. And then he finally thought to himself, wait a minute, there's an app in this. 150,000 downloads in 3 months at $4 each. All written by himself, one guy. And this is born of necessity. He's a good coder. He said to me, he's like, I'm not the greatest coder in the world. He just had a great idea. And this is one of the things that I love about what's going on with technology in New York right now. It reminds me of kind of the punk rock moment in music in the 1970s, where not only did it become acceptable for any musician to make music, you didn't have to have chops like Steve Hackett from Genesis to play guitar. You could just play 3 chords and have something to say and it would work. And over time, technology's enabled that more and more in music. And I think that the technology itself generally is democratizing right now to the point where we have artists like Tahir Hemphill creating his really cool hip hop database. We have guys like Mike Hill working out of a cafe in the Lower East Side and creating an app that 150,000 people found useful enough to pay money for, to download. That's what I think is really exciting right now. Now, that's not to say that those of you who are working at startups, who founded them, who are funding them, we talked a lot about that in the series as well, but I wanted to just kind of turn you on to these folks if you don't know about them, because there's a lot of talent there. And there are a lot of really good business ideas floating out there too, I think. So anyway, I hope that you will take a chance to watch some of the episodes of NYC 2.0 that are online, and we are hoping to start production for the second season sometime this spring. So if you think that you have a cool idea, you have a cool company, you want us to consider you for the series, come and talk to me afterwards. Now, so that's basically my my little spiel here, my keynote in Keynote. And I am now going to introduce the first of our presenters tonight. I had the chance to talk to Ori Inbar last week about Ogmento, and this is something that is kind of technology that I think is really cool, but for a long time, I don't know, it just feels like it hasn't been ready for prime time yet. Augmented reality, and specifically augmented reality gaming. Ori's going to tell us a little bit about Ogmento's work in that space. He's got a couple of games he wants to tell us about. Basically, gaming that lets you actually play in a real space. I mean, I guess there are elements of social networking in this. There are elements of gaming, obviously, all kinds of stuff. But I'll let Ori come on up here and tell you about what Ogmento is doing. Ori?
All right. Thanks, Rick. Hi, everybody. Good to see you tonight. My name is Ori Inbar. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Ogmento, and really happy to be here. Ogmento is a mobile games company, but we have a twist. And the twist is that we are mixing the real with the virtual to create a whole new kind of experience for video games that are played in the real world. So a little bit about the company. We closed our first round of investment in May of 2010, built a gaming platform for augmented reality and location-based games, and released 2 major titles this year. That's what we've done so far. And if you want to, just before we kind of get into the actual games, just understand the market opportunity, because I heard it's kind of a business-oriented audience today. So if you look at the gaming industry, the $77 billion gaming industry, and what it's been through over the last few years, it was a major transformation in terms of technologies, business models, genres, and the incumbents are fighting to kind of stay on top, and the whole new companies, Zynga, that are taking over, whole new chunks of this industry. So we've seen how social is doing a lot of a big impact on this industry. And mobile games are all of a sudden exploding with billions of devices, all capable of playing high-end gaming already in your pocket. What's happening next is that some emerging technologies, such as location-based and augmented reality, which completely change the way we play and where we play, are coming into the picture and are poised to disrupt the market once again. I think many people in the industry, just like Rick said, think this is still, way to go before we're going to be able to experience these kind of technologies. But I'm here today to try and prove you that it's actually not as far out as you might think. We believe that the combination of these elements, social, mobile, location-based, and augmented reality, is going to define this next big cycle in gaming and probably in apps in general. And the question is, so what's this cycle looking like? What's this next gaming platform like? We think it's the world. We see the world as the final gaming platform, where people, places, and things in your environment become an integral part of the gaming experience. The game we build are social. They are relevant to your location. They know where you are and what you're looking at, They literally see what you see and therefore enable you to interact with practically anything around you. So what does that mean? How do you really transform the world into a gaming platform? Well, with augmented reality, our goal is to make everything in your surroundings playable, or clickable, if you will. But I think that most of you probably have seen augmented reality games in the past. By the way, everybody here has heard about this term before, augmented reality? Show of hands. Anybody never heard about augmented reality before? Okay, there's a couple. So, in simple terms, it's about overlaying graphics on the real world, doing it in real time, so that things around you can really become integral part of what you're looking at. So that's kind of on a simple level. But I'm going to try to show a little bit of the examples of what we're doing with this. But I think a lot of you have seen augmented reality games of two types, basically. One type is where you kind of shoot spaceships all around you. They come from here, from there, and you have a live video feed in the background. So that's not really augmented reality. It's more of a sensor-based game. Could be pretty cool, but you're not really interacting with what's happening around you. The second type is where you point your phone to a card or a printout. It could be on a table or maybe on a wall, and then you see some graphics overlaid on top of it, and you can interact with it. That could be pretty cool interaction, but if you think about driving adoption on a large scale, the need to have this printout or a card is a stumbling block for adoption by many. So what we're trying to do is really take augmented reality to a whole new level, where practically anything around you can become a trigger for play. So to get a taste of this, let's take a look at some of the videos here. So let's say you are in a bar, your favorite beer is just in front of you, and you want to brag with your friends that you can do some really cool stuff. So how about tossing a virtual ring on a real bottle? And watching how these two worlds, the virtual and the real, interact in front of you as if they're in the same realm. That was a miss. So let's try another one. Real high. You can hear the sound where the ring actually hits the bottle. You hear the sound of interaction, and that's kind of enhancing the experience. So I think this really completely changes the way we interact with brands and with products. So instead of going to a website or Facebook or, God forbid, watch a commercial, here you can interact with the brand itself, with the product itself, and potentially get content from it, get excited, and learn more about the brand if that's what the purpose is. Let's take a look at another one. So now what if you're outdoors? You're on the street during your daily routine, walking to the bank, and then there's this special promotion in the store. So instead of getting this, excuse me, Foursquare, annoying daily deal alert, why not just play right there? So this is without sound, where you can basically shoot hoops at the store. I think we'll all agree it's much more fun than just checking into that place, right? Maybe you kind of compete with your friends on who has the highest score in that location, and you can become the king of that location and advance in the game, and potentially get a nice reward. You can also do it on street signs, or even this building next door can become a trigger for play. That was a hit. And if you're running totally out of ideas, even your hand can become a target for the game. The third example is based on our patented technology, where we can basically bring to life natural shapes. And in this specific example, you draw a line on a paper with a marker or a pen, and that becomes a virtual track for a virtual car inside the game. So we're using here an iPad that's standing on the table. You can press stop and go to drive the car. Try to do it carefully without losing the track. So all of a sudden, when every shape can become a trigger for a game, when you start looking around in a whole new way at things, these natural shapes get a new meaning, and you become more aware of what's happening around you. And that's really one of the purposes of what we're doing, which is we want kids to get away from the couch, where they're spending hours a day playing video game, which is very addictive, and start looking around, start understanding what's going on in the world, but not by forcing them to do this, but through games that are at least as interesting and as addictive as these other games. So a little bit about the business model, since we were trying to understand how you can actually build a business with this. Like most mobile companies, we have very similar goals. We want to attract a very large audience. We want them to come back to the application over and over again, and then we want to be able to monetize on them. So we're kind of building our model on the same principles, but we're enhancing it to take advantage of augmented reality and location-based mechanics. So we publish games which are mostly built on a franchise. Example is an NBA game that we just released last month, and a game based on Paranormal Activity, the movie, earlier last year. And that allows us to get to a, rise be above the noise and get to a wide audience, and we do it with a free-to-play. So basically reducing the barrier for adoption. The second part is we want them to come back to the game and kind of increase the stickiness of the game. And again, you do it with typical things like social activities and so on, an interesting game. But we have another twist here, which is the real-world hooks. So when you play this game, all of a sudden, even if you forget about the game, you stick your phone into the pocket. When you walk down the street and you see something that reminds you about the game, that brings you back into the game. Every time you switch location around the city, you say, hey, what if I grab this location? And that's kind of a whole new way to drive people to play. And in a sense, it makes their daily routine more interesting. And usually when you play games, it's, you get back to your home, you sit in front of the TV or your mobile device and you play. Here, there's millions of triggers around you that get you back into the game. And finally is how to monetize on this. We have the traditional approaches of in-game virtual goods and special offers and ads and so on. We're adding on top of it the ability to increase the brand engagement. So just like with the Dos Equis beer example, every time you play this game with the bottle, you essentially click on that brand. And that interaction is worth a lot for those brands. Much more than just a click on a banner on a website. So we call it clicks on bricks, which is a whole new way to monetize on practically anything that you see out there, the real products and the actual brands. So now, before we conclude, just let's take a look at our latest major title. It's called NBA King of the Court, a license from the NBA that we have developed. It's our own game. And it's currently available on the App Store for iPhone, as well as the Android market for Android phones. And if you want to experience where this is going, go ahead, download it and give it a shot. Here's a quick video of the gaming experience. So the idea is that we place virtual basketball courts all over the city, all over the country, in your neighborhood spots, and you can see those courts on the map. And if you want to, have a little break from actual basketball, why not play some virtual basketball? You scan in camera mode, you can see some of those courts. This one is on top of the Brooklyn Bridge. And then using the simple mechanic, you can shoot it as court. And whoever has the highest score for this court becomes king of the court. And then we add on top of it all sorts of defense power-ups and offensive power-ups that you can use to strategize around these courts and compete with your friends. And this is really becoming a big social competition/competition game. You can customize your court with your favorite team, you can upgrade courts and collect royalties when other people play in your court. And it's a pretty addictive game for many of our players. They say, when you get this alert that somebody has taken over your court, you just run out to that street corner and you grab it So that's my story. I'd be happy to answer some questions later on and show you live demos on the phone itself. But with that, thanks very much.
I noticed. Oh, turn that back on. So we're going to go from playing games to health and the human body. It's a kind of an abrupt transition here, but Frank Sculli from BioDigital is going to show us some new stuff that they've been doing, which sounds very cool. I'm very excited to see this. Basically, technology that allows you to sort of build stuff out onto a 3D detailed map of the human body and everything inside it for sort of health educational purposes and so on.
Featured in the New York Times yesterday.
Featured actually, exactly, in yesterday's New York Times business section. So if you still subscribe to Dead Tree Media, I know there are a few of us who do. You probably have one lying around at home. If not, it's still up online. And actually, I think was one of the tops in the business section. Actually, today I looked. It's one of the top 5 articles in the business section. Still, yeah.
That's good news.
So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
You good to go, Frank?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, hit it, buddy.
Great.
Ladies and gentlemen, Frank Sculli.
Thank you, Rick. Hi, everyone. As Rick mentioned, my name's Frank Sculli, and I'm a co-founder of a medical simulation company that's located right here in Soho called BioDigital. And tonight I'm going to attempt to show you the evolution of our simulators, followed by an example of a platform that we more recently released. So real quickly, a little bit about us. Around 2001, we saw the emergence of 3D technology, primarily for gaming and Hollywood. And we thought that that same 3D technology could solve a real problem in healthcare education. So in late 2002, we founded BioDigital Systems with the mission to facilitate medical understanding through the use of novel 3D visualization technologies. And since then, we've helped this wide range of clients from biotech, pharma, med device, hospitals, all sorts of clinicians, better understand medicine using virtual technology. One of the earliest groups that we had a real honor to work with is called the Smile Train. Is anyone here familiar with Smile Train? Yeah, so they're also in New York, incredible charity, and they help repair these gaping holes in children's faces called clefts. So, you don't see this much in the US anymore because most of these children are fixed soon after birth, but in less developed countries, it's still a big problem. And what these organizations traditionally did was send doctors around the world on missions to help repair these children's faces. And Smile Train quickly realized that it was really hard to make a dent this way, that to have a true impact, they had to empower the local doctors to do this operation themselves. With language and location as big barriers to educating those doctors, technology really became a cornerstone of that training. So this is a little girl named Yun, and in collaboration with New York University, our 3D director named Aaron was able to take scan data and reconstruct her head in 3D and then animate that cleft lip procedure. He then took that and put it within an interactive environment. So this is a screen capture of someone using that interactive environment. And we've been told that doing a cleft repair is a lot like a 3D puzzle. So this simulator allows you to look at spatial relationships with a lot of clarity. It also allows you to look at the different cognitive tasks in a procedure at your own pace and remove different tissue layers to look at underlying structures. So Smile Train now believes that they're on the verge of repairing more clefts than children actually born with them, which in theory would eradicate the disease. Actually, keep that graphic in mind, just because when I show you our more recent stuff, this was done around 2006. And at the time, this was a pretty big, heavy desktop application. So hopefully you'll see how far things have come. So more recently, a surgeon named Janice Lee at UCSF saw our technology and thought it could help address a big problem that her students have. They actually learn to make injections by sticking needles in each other. Yeah, seriously, that's how they learn to do this, right? This is a photo of medical students doing blood draws, excuse me. But in her case, oral surgery students, well, they have to learn how to inject anesthetic inside the mouth around nerves. So it's a huge problem for obvious reasons, right? It's dangerous, it's unethical. It's something that you can't do too many times, right, until you get it right. So perfect place for a virtual environment. So this is a screen capture of someone using the simulator that we built with UCSF. And this one's haptic based. So it has a peripheral, and that peripheral allows you to control that virtual needle and provides force feedback. So you can actually feel the inside of the patient's mouth. As you notice, the patient also flinches if you do something he doesn't like. And there's that phantom needle there to guide you on proper insertion. Also includes a full assessment engine. So if you're a professor and you want to look at how your students are performing, or a student, you want to compare yourself to your peers, it allows you to do all that. So this simulator is now being validated with a pilot group of students, and we hope to make it widely available near the end of this year. Just in general, whether you're a student practicing on student, or especially a doctor practicing on patients, it's kind of like a medieval approach to learning. And pilots, right? They practice in flight simulators until they reach a certain competency and don't put passengers at risk. Well, surgeons should have that same opportunity available to them. They could practice till they have a competency level where they feel safe going into the operating room. So the two examples I've showed you so far were built for very specific purposes. But from the beginning, we really wanted to do something that would allow a had much more mass appeal. So you're all familiar with this relationship. Doctors trying to educate their patients. If you look at the life sciences at a much deeper level, you really see this big web of inefficient, ugly communication and education. So we wanted to build a platform that would allow all these groups to better communicate amongst each other. So last year, we released what we call the BioDigital Human Platform. And now I'm just going to jump to a live demo. Let's see if I can do this. So this virtual body, unlike the screen captures I showed you before, is running 100% in a browser. It uses a new spec called WebGL, which was released last year, and it's a standard for putting 3D online. I don't know if any of the Google Chrome developers are here, but if they are, thank you, because they helped enable this technology. So compared to what I showed you before, this male and female, now over 4,000 3D objects running in a browser in real time. So you can do a number of things with it. You can hide and show different anatomy layers. You can select things. Everything's fully labeled. They have audio labels. We supplement the visuals with data from any structured source through our API. This is Wikipedia, but it can really be anything. You can also search. So, I don't know, urinary system, for instance. And it has this sort of Google Earth-like fly-to ability. And so you can better see internal organs. It goes into what we call X-ray mode. If you want even clear view, you can isolate those organs. So the whole urinary system, maybe just the left kidney, respiratory system, or I don't know, even the entire cardiovascular system. So one other example that I think really shows the 3D nature of this environment well is the ability to do cross sections. So you can cross section the body from any angle, and this gives you a view that may be more analogous to what you'd see in a, say, a CT or an MRI scan. There are a bunch of other tools built in. To save some time, I'm going to skip over those. You can take snapshots, you can bookmark views and share them, or save them for future reference. You can, of course, dissect the anatomy. But what I want to save a few minutes to show you sort of what we're planning on doing this year. Because as the New York Times article pointed out, this system has a lot of utility for professionals and doctors and students at the moment, but we still want to do something that would allow regular people to really better understand their health. So this year, we're introducing a lot more conditions, disease, treatments, and physiology into this virtual environment. So for instance, here's atrial fib, and the heart's beating. And you can see now how it has that sort of abnormal fluttering. You could also still cross-section it, so if you wanted to go inside, you can even see the valve movement. Devices. We can put devices in this body. So here's a dental implant. And if you ever get knocked out in your dentist chair and you wake up with a fake tooth, this is what's going on. So now I'll quickly show you a couple things that are a little more experimental, but we're working on putting all different stages of cancer in this environment. Patients obviously have a lot of trouble dealing with new diagnosis, so do their families. And reading a medical record is something that patients can't do and physicians have trouble communicating. But with a visual representation, it's much more intuitive. So this is stage 4 lung cancer, for instance. And we're actively working on mapping this virtual body to electronic health records, so ultimately everyone can have that visual representation of their health. Treatments. So for years we've been building surgical animation for different doctors, and now we could take that content and we could put it in this virtual environment so that people can interact with it better. So I just loaded an appendectomy, and you'll see the introduction of these laparoscopic instruments and the removal of that useless, sort of unusual piece of tissue that hangs off the lower colon. And we could also now look at this operation from any angle, which you can't do in real life, obviously. So finally, I think I'm going to leave off by showing you our first stab at physiologic function. We want to bring this to life even more, and through our API, we want people to control the body's physiology. So right now, for instance, I can make the body breathe. We can look at its respiratory rate and heart rate, but I can actually control this with my cell phone, for instance. So I can adjust the heart and I can adjust the lung rate. And we eventually see this being embedded in tons of different applications, similar to how Google Maps is the basis for a lot of geo applications. So in summary, whether it's my 8-year-old niece who's trying to understand the eyeball in her science class, or a 60-year-old who wants to know more about his ACL tear, we want to take understanding the body from something that's often scary and challenging to an experience that's easy and intuitive and hopefully fascinating. So thank you.
I can't help but think when I see that about, I went on a little binge. I was sick the other day, and I went on a binge of rewatching a bunch of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and thinking that that's almost as cool as like what they have in sickbay on the Enterprise. There, it's like 500 years ahead of what Roddenberry's heirs thought it would be. The next piece of technology we're going to be hearing about is something else that's evolving more rapidly, I think, even than the folks who wrote Star Trek and Star Trek: The Next Generation thought. Remember, Kirk and Spock in the old series, and Picard and everybody in The Next Generation would just talk to the computer. And so now we're going to hear from Johan Schalkwyk, who's a senior research scientist here at Google, home team represent, who's been doing a lot of work on voice recognition stuff. And so I guess, come on up, Johan.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Johan Schalkwyk. I've been at Google for about 6.5 years working on a single task. That's to make Google understand your voice. And we've launched this on Android phones and iPhones for quite a few years now. So today I'm basically the topic is kind of interesting title is A New Era of Augmented Humanity. So what does this actually mean? Okay, so kind of behind this concept is this artificial intelligence. So what do we mean by artificial intelligence? So I think when you hear this term, you probably think Star Trek. And that's what I would think. And you kind of think about robots doing things for you. The data in Star Trek. Basically humans inventing machines to make our life easier. Just kind of as a side story, when I was 10, that's when I got my first computer, started programming in BASIC. My first program I still remember to this day, what I called Baby. I wanted to build something that understands me and I can talk to. And I haven't got more than printf, where I say what the baby's going to say. And the next thing of understanding you was to come, and I'm still doing that. So it's a topic you can spend your whole life on, literally. Okay. So what do we mean by augmented humanity? So instead of with artificial intelligence, where you think of building a robot, we're using the fields of artificial intelligence to build, in a sense, with your phone, building interfaces and accessing data. So with your phone, you can speak using your voice. And we can recognize your voice using the fields of artificial intelligence. We can take that text and we can translate it in any language using methods in artificial intelligence. We can take pictures and we can recognize their landmarks. So instead of, in a sense, building intelligent systems, we're using those systems to augment your own intelligence. You take the phone, you interact with the world, using your voice, using vision. You can go to a foreign country. You can interact with the people in the different languages using these technologies. So that's what we mean by augmenting your humanity, is we're using the fields of artificial intelligence and your smartphone connected to Google to augment it. And so basically now you have super senses. You can speak to anyone in the world. That's our vision. We're not there yet. You can understand them. You can recognize any landmark. You can navigate anywhere in the world. You don't need difficult maps to read anymore. And you can remember all the facts of the world. And so that's what we mean by augmenting your intelligence. So part of Google's vision, and this is from day one, is to organize the world's information. So the way mobile changes this is the world's information is not just a bunch of web pages. When you're out and about, there's information. You have landmarks that you don't recognize. You're in a Japanese restaurant in Japan, and there's a menu that you don't recognize and you want to order from. So how do you do that? You might want to navigate in a strange place. So there's information in the world that's physical. And with mobile devices and with the technologies that I'm show today and discuss, is we make that information accessible as well. So that fits really nicely within Google's motto of making the world's information accessible and organizing it. So at the heart of it is a smartphone. The smartphone is connected to the cloud via 3G or 4G connections or Wi-Fi. The smartphone has a camera, so that's kind of the eyes. It's got a microphone, it can listen to you. It's got navigation capabilities. And these sensors are just keep on coming. It's got a compass. It can show you direction where you're going. As the sensors improve, we find novel ways to use them and make useful applications out of that. So to make this more concrete, I'll be working through a few technologies that we've been working on. One is speech recognition, which is my focus, machine translation, computer vision, and navigation. And the interesting thing we'll see is these technologies are maturing, and then when you combine them, very cool and interesting stuff happens. So what makes speech recognition work? So I'm not going to describe how the technology works, but some key insights. You're probably familiar with the area of speech recognition. You've probably interacted with it in the past with trying to call somebody by voice. I call mom at home. You might have interacted with drag and dictate, where you can do medical dictation or like for lawyers. Recognizing a person's voice is a really hard problem. So what makes us different at Google and positions as well, I believe, is you need data. You need examples of how people pronounce words. You need thousands or millions of examples of them. Then you need to know what people are searching for so that you can predict what they're going to say. So all of that data can't fit on a phone yet. Phones are growing. But through access to the cloud, you can build a recognizer that can recognize your voice and access information. So your phone has got a fairly powerful CPU, but it's backed by hundreds of thousands of CPUs in Google. So basically you can think of, you've got a smartphone in your pocket. It just happens to be in the cloud. Okay. So let me go through a few demonstrations kind of to show you the various technologies and how they come together. So the first one I'll show you is the main application we call voice search. This is basically, you're searching Google by voice. So on a phone, even in the latest and greatest phones, this keyboard, you can type on it, and if you have to, I still have fat fingers. I still make mistakes. Whereas speaking is so much more natural. And so let's just start off. Weather in New York City. So that took me literally about 2 seconds to utter, about a couple hundred milliseconds to recognize and render the results. So very quick access to information. So you're out and about. I need to still have dinner, and I'm very fond of Thai food, so let's find good Thai restaurants nearby. Map of Thai food restaurants. So it goes into this, what I just showed you is called voice actions. Okay. So not only did I do a search, but I also told the system that I'm interested in a map. So I'm combined searching for something and doing an action. So you can interact with the map and you can find more information. So this is how basically bringing the power of voice search to Google Maps. And that makes your interaction so much easier. Send text message to Hong Hu. I hope you have a good birthday. So I just send a message. So you can notice here that I said birthday, but it got a misrecognition. So what you could do, you can tap on the word which was incorrectly recognized, and lo and behold, birthday was there. I could fix it. So speech recognition is not perfect. The day where every word is correctly recognized 100% of the time means I'm out of a job. And it's a very hard problem. Even people have a lot of problem recognizing voice with, in noise, with pronunciations. But here's an example. You can quickly correct it. And that saved so many keystrokes. Typing this with this keyboard would have taken quite a few seconds more. So, okay. So now I'll quickly, okay. Okay, I'll just skip this. Okay. So the next section I want to go into is called a section on machine translation. We're working with my colleagues in Mountain View, California, who've been working on Translate for about equal amount of time, 7, 8 years. And how Translate works, this is a picture of the Rosetta Stone. It's one of the only artifacts that has 3 languages. The one is, I believe, some Egyptian hieroglyphics of the same text. That we call parallel corpora. So the way we train our translation systems is we have typically news text, also text we get from the United Nations, where we have what is said, let's say, in French and in English, and it's the same topic, the same sentences being spoken side by side. And so we can automatically translate learn what the translations would have been from one to the other. And so with lots of data like this, we can start building translations between pairs of languages. So today, Google Translate can translate from, I believe, 60 languages to any other 60 languages. It's 3,600 language pairs. And the interesting thing is we don't necessarily have parallel corpora between every 2 language pairs, for example, between Hindi and Afrikaans, which is my mother tongue. But you can translate from Hindi to English, from English to Afrikaans, and then suddenly I can digest a Hindi text in my native language. And again, what makes this really compelling at Google is using the power of the cloud, lots of compute power and lots of data, we can make translation systems that do really, really well. And so what I'm going to show in the next demonstration is called Google Translate, and you can find it on iPhone. You can download it from the App Store or on Android devices. And so kind of the application allows you to translate between any of the 60 language pairs I've discussed. In Google Search by Voice, which is you can dictate or you can search. We've launched so far about 30 languages. So you can not only translate by typing, but you can also speak the translation. So here's an example from translating English to Spanish. And so rather than showing a canned example, I'll just try to do something new. How do I get to Google in New York City? Okay. So there's the English. I don't speak Spanish, unfortunately. What I could do, I do speak Afrikaans. And hoe kom ek by Google in New York Stad? Pretty good. So you have to trust me on that. Okay. My wife is from China, and when I visit China, I have a really tough time speaking to my parents, and so this could become quite useful. So, and what you then could do, there's a little speak button, so I can press. Let's just see. I don't speak Chinese either, so I don't know if that sounds good or not. But you can see how this starting to break the language barrier. Not only can you communicate what your intent is when you're trying to travel, you really need to get to the airport or the restroom. You can speak to that person in his language because they might not understand you. then we have this extra mode here. I'll just kind of show you, but not. Okay. We call conversation mode. So imagine you're in Italy, you're trying to learn something about maybe a restaurant or where you want to go to. The person just doesn't speak English. You can enter a conversation with him where you hand your phone to him and say, just press this button and speak. Maybe if you first say, please press the button and speak. But you can have a conversation in a language you don't speak. And this is actually also a good way to learn the language. So here's a nice example of two technologies developed independently, maturing to the degree that they become useful to users. And then you combine them, and suddenly you have the Star Trek communicator, like you can have speak to any alien in the world in their language. We don't have Klingon launched yet, but we do have Pig Latin and Latin launched. Okay. 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 So the last one, actually, I probably won't show it due to lack of time, but the same thing becomes now true for computer vision. We have a database of literally billions of images of the world. And those images are labeled to various extents. Sometimes they just have a title. Sometimes there's good metadata describing the image. So we can build descriptions of images to text. So you're out and about, and you can, with your phone, take a picture of a monument. And so that's a picture. And basically, the phone will tell you something about it. Let me see. Yeah, okay. But I actually, okay. I see, okay, yeah. So there's kind of another examples of these technologies just coming together. And there's also one with, you can take pictures of a restaurant menu in a different language and translate it. So this is what, kind of to conclude, what we're trying to do is taking the field of artificial intelligence in all these areas, bringing data and compute power to build what I've been calling the supercomputer in your pocket. And this is what makes it possible. It's like your phone can be connected to Google, doing all these wonderful things, and make what I always try to emphasize, useful products where people really need them and find them useful from a day-to-day life. Thank you.
There is, I would imagine, Johan, that one of the difficult things to deal with is people with different accents, right? There's a great sketch shortly after some of this stuff started to become available publicly. There's a great sketch from a British comedy show. If you just Google the phrase "Scottish elevator," it's the first skit that shows up, and it's two guys from Edinburgh in a voice-controlled elevator, which the elevator has an American accent, and they're trying to get to the 11th floor. We just heard about basically the Star Trek Universal Translator, 500 years ahead of its time. Now Matt Bridges is going to talk to us about Google Goggles, which is a way of visually, right, searching. I want to ask you, we did in NYC 2.0, we did a segment about some folks up at Columbia who had developed an application called LeafSnap. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with it? Yep. Yeah, it's a really cool thing. It's basically, there was a group of urban foresters who are using it in New York City. Mayor Bloomberg's trying to plant 1 million trees around the city, but in order to figure out where the trees need to go, they want to know where all the trees already are in New York City. And one of the most difficult parts of that problem is you have these volunteers fanning out over the city, but identifying the species of a tree is not necessarily all that easy. There are even botanists who will argue about this for hours. So what these folks up at Columbia did in collaboration with folks at the Smithsonian was they now have an app that's both an Android and an iOS app where you pluck a leaf off the tree, you put it against a white background, you snap it with your smartphone, and it ranks like the top 5 trees that it thinks it is. And if it knows what it is, it just says it's this. And if it's the next few, if there are choices, then it'll say, look at the root structure or look at the bark. Very cool stuff that's being deployed. Matt's going to talk about Google Goggles now.
Yep. So the previous presenter gave a great introduction as to kind of machine artificial intelligence and machine computer vision that are combining to enable these kinds of awesome applications, especially on mobile phones. So my name is Matthew Bridges. I've been working on Google Goggles for about 2 years now. And we aim to do mobile visual search, particularly from a universal context. You put anything in front of goggles, and we hope to tell you what it is, give you information about it, and provide you links to something that you can do with it. In particular, we do a lot of DVDs, CDs, books, this kind of stuff. We identify it, and we can get you to the Amazon page. We do text recognition for things like translation, also for things like extracting a business card. And as I'll show you in some demos, document recognition. And finally, also recognition of places. So if you're on the street and you have see a business that you want to get the menu for or take a rating of, you can take a picture of the storefront, and we'll give you that back. So, inside. Which thing? Oh, thank you. All right, so to illustrate the document recognition use case, which we just added in our 1.7 version back in December, I have a book, and I'm just going to flip to a random page. And take a picture of some of the text here. So if you happen to see some of this text on a web page and you didn't quite know where it came from, or you didn't believe where the author quoted it came from, then you could take a picture of that text, and we would show you that it came from this book. And we could even, since we have a good corpus of books, take you to the book or to the page and show you where the text was. No.
It's the podium mic.
Not the podium mic.
I can do this.
Yeah, that'd be easier. Thanks. There you go. All right. So you could easily find out where this piece of text had come from, or the book, and find out more about the book, potentially buy it if you're really interested. So that's kind of identifying where text comes from. There's also the ability to take the offline world and bring it into the online world. So here I have a picture of a New York Times article from today. And I'm going to take a picture of a random paragraph here. And so if you were, on the subway, if you were on the subway and somebody else had a newspaper that you were perhaps reading the back of course now it's not going to work. And you wanted to take that article with you. Let's try a different paragraph. All right, well, this is the problem with live demos, but you have to trust me that if you take a picture of an article, or magazine article, or newspaper article, we can get you to the online version of that article, just like we got you to the online version of the book. Similarly to recognizing documents, we recognize landmarks. So as previous presenter showed, this happens to be a landmark in Italy. And if you visited Italy, or Rome particularly, you might know what it is. But I didn't until, yes, it's the monument to Vittorio Emanuele II. So you can find out not only what the landmark is, but we can take you to more information about the landmark. So we can get you the Wikipedia article, so you can find out that this was a king of Italy back in the 19th century. That was what he looked like. And see if that looks like the statue that might be up there. All right. And if in the cases where we don't identify what's in the picture, we want users to help us. So we recently added the ability for user-generated content, where users can take the picture, annotate it, and we'll tell them, and we'll take that into our database and give it back to them and share that with others. So I have particularly here the Noogler hat that you get when you join Google. Not surprisingly, this is not in our database. So I'll take a picture of this. Oops. We try to give you something that looks similar, so color-wise similar. But just add this to our database for the moment. Yep. So now we thank ourselves. And if I go and search again, I should get this back. The addition is almost instantaneous. Yep. And so there we have the user submitted result that we can use to further refine our results. And interestingly enough, I can take a picture of my laptop's keyboard, and we will correctly figure out that it's a MacBook Pro. But the user submitted result will actually tell us that it's the 15-inch model as opposed to some random model. So the users can also help us refine our results as opposed to just giving us results. And then kind of the last type of result that I want to demo for today, which I think was kind of the most interesting one we launched last year, Sudoku puzzles. So here we're going to combine computer vision with the ability to solve Sudoku puzzles to kind of create that almost scary kind of machine intelligence. So we'll take a picture of the puzzle. And we got the user submit results. So there's the Sudoku puzzle, and we can solve this puzzle for you just by having taken the picture of it. And then one of our other recently launched features is what we call continuous mode goggling. So what I've been showing you up until now is single snapshot. You take a picture, and you have to get the lighting right, or you have to get the focus right, or any number of things can go wrong in taking pictures. But with continuous goggling, you can just hover over it, and almost even faster than in single shot will get you to the result. And so this also allows you to add multiple things, or recognize multiple things in one pass. So you can take a whole bunch of books on your library shelf and hopefully just scan over them, get the titles, get the books. And you can imagine how this integrates with our applications. And thank you.
I can kind of keep this Star Trek thread going all night long up until the very last one here, because one of the other things, they didn't really deal with it that much in the original series, but in the next generation, they had devices on the Enterprise that would just make stuff for them. Yeah, I broke my tea mug, Picard says, and suddenly there's a new tea mug that appears for him. This also relates back to one of the companies I was talking about before, MakerBot in Brooklyn, kind of makes a baby version of this technology. It's 3D printing, which is in MakerBot's version, it's a platform that moves on an XY axis, and then a nozzle that ejects a melted plastic, little droplets of it, and it moves up and down. So the MakerBot can make little stuff like that. It's pretty low resolution as far as this goes. What this guy's going to tell us about is a company that's bringing 3D printing to the masses in another way. Peter Weijmarshausen of Shapeways, who I wanted to have in the first season. We're hoping that we can get them in the second season. Do you want this, Mike?
Sure. Go for it, Peter. Okay. Thanks. And thanks for stealing my little bridge that I had in mind. I'm good at that. Yes, indeed. We've been talking about machines helping us in our daily life, and also about the Star Trek reference. And I think both could apply to what we're doing at Shapeways. I'd like to talk a little bit about the democratization of production. Lots of words, but what does that really mean to us, and why do we feel that it's important, and why are we so passionate about it at Shapeways? Well, if you look around you, we're surrounded by products. And at closer view, you notice that these products all look the same. And is that really something that we want? I don't think so. If you also look closer, that things that we're really passionate about, we start to customize them. Sometimes our laptop by putting a sticker. Some people go a little bit further. But the problem with this is, of course, that these customizations, if they're done by a passionate individual, they can be a hobby, and it's okay. But if you look at the cost involved, it's very, very expensive to get a car like this, if you would order one. So how do we get things that we really want? Well, we used to know how to make things custom. Before the Industrial Revolution, we made everything by hand, everything to spec. And we feel that this is a really important reason why there is this revolution of the things handmade. You know, can make things pottery. But the problem with that, of course, is that if we start making everything by hand again, it doesn't scale. And again, it might be expensive. So how do we go from mass to personalized manufacturing? We use a 3D printer. A bigger one, granted, than the MakerBot, although the principles are the same. These machines are capable of taking a digital description of an object, of a product, and make it for you. Just like the little thingy that I brought with me that I'll show later. That is made in one go. You can make very complex items, products, in one single shot. And we believe that's really, really cool. And it's opening up a lot of opportunities for people. Because these personalized or custom products make me really feel unique. People care about those things. So what is Shapeways? Shapeways is the place for anyone really to make, buy and sell their own products using the web and our service. So how does it work? Well, first of all, if you're a product designer, you can upload your stuff to Shapeways and we will just make it for you. But what is way cooler, that as a product designer, you can also open a shop at Shapeways. And then everybody who has access to our website, everybody who can use the web, can go there and buy those things. And we'll make it. And then the coolest part is where creative people, or actually anyone, can work together with product designers and get really exactly what they want. And we make it on demand. We manufacture it just in time and ship it worldwide. And we do that not only in plastics, as is very well known, but also in stainless steel. We do it in glass, we do it in silver, we do it in ceramics, and many more materials are up and coming. So what does that mean? It means that the time to market for products really goes down to zero. One of the great examples I was blown away by was in 2010 on a Friday, I remember it well, the iPad was launched. And on the Monday after, this guy launched his iPad cover. Without the help of Apple, he put a product into the market, available for everybody to buy, and he starts selling it. And I think it's amazing that product designers with a cool idea don't have to look for manufacturers, don't have to look for retail, don't have to look for loans to afford this manufacturing, but can simply put their product design on Shapeways and start selling if they want to. And then they start solving problems that we all have. Another great idea is that products will become better much, much quicker because of this. You know, when you have mass production, you have to make at least 10,000 or maybe even 100,000 copies of something. You sell it, and after 2 copies, people tell you what's wrong with it, and you go, oh, sharks. And you have to sell the remaining part, or you have to trash it, which is really bad, and then you improve. Well, if you manufacture just in time that 3D printing is enabling you, you can take this feedback into account and make a next version immediately. And one of the ideas here is from Christina Westbrook, which is an iPhone cover. And she made like 9 versions in a year's time based on customer feedback. So it was really what she wanted, and people were buying it. And the last, you know, you don't have any cost and thus no risk to go to market. You just put it online. Yes, you have maybe a little bit of time wasted if nobody buys it, but that's it. You don't have any setup costs, you don't have any investments to make besides your own time. And then if it's a great idea, people will start buying it. If not, well, you try again, right? So what are people making? They make their own jewelry. Or they make accessories for the home. Or, and yes, this one flies, people print a remote-controlled helicopter. Unfortunately, not the batteries yet, nor the electronics. That's up and coming. But all the rest is 3D printed. And there's, if you Google it, then you'll find videos on YouTube where this thing is flying around. And if it crashes, of course, spare parts are infinite. So what does that mean? Is that people start using this, and at this moment we're getting about 30,000 new products or models every month, and this is growing at an incredible rate. And we've printed last year only 750,000 products. Mind you, there's a team of about 10 people in production handling all of this. The rest of us is coding or doing other stuff. So 10 people were able to make 750,000 mainly unique products at a reasonable price, and we've just started. That's what I wanted to share. Thanks. Oh yeah, one thing. I promised a little demo.
Oh. And that's one pass.
Yes, this is coming out of the machine. This is coming out of the machine in one shot. So it's more than 70 moving parts produced by a machine based on a digital description coming out of the machine. And you can buy it on shapeways.com if you like it.
How much is it?
It's about $100.
Wow. Okay, we've got, thanks, Peter. That's very cool. The future, made here in New York City. Time for questions and answers. Anybody who has, just raise your hand, I'll come over to you, and it's for anybody. So can we get all the presenters up on stage, please, to be grilled? And does anybody have any questions? In the back, that's the first hand I saw. If I go with the first hand I saw, which was you, back here.
Hi, I'm CJ. The last person that spoke, the guy that made the thing that went around the iPad, did they make a lot of money?
Can everybody hear me without the mic?
Go to the podium mic.
Podium mic. He made a considerable amount of money, given the fact that he just had to design it. It's just not being derogatively meant, but his investment was designing it. Through the years since the iPad launched, we've seen thousands of iPad covers in different shapes and forms come by. So it's a popular item, yes. And this guy did quite well.
And I just have one more question for the first guy with who made the games. Does the games? Do you ever look into the basketball one was great, but if they're like violent games, do you ever think about the kids maybe growing up and like if they see that all the time, maybe they see that and they think of that as life, and maybe think violence would go up?
When I first got into the world of augmented reality, that's one of the first concerns that I heard from parents, because I was promoting an educational game, and said, what if they start walking on the street and then they just interact with things and car comes, and so on. So yes, is there a danger with new technology? Of course, it's up to the content developers, to the policymakers to make sure that it's going in the right direction. Every technology has the potential to go good and bad, and I think we all need to make sure it goes on the right side.
Another question here.
I have a question for Peter. How close we are to create a customized shoes? Do you know if... Well, my question comes from a health, I guess, question, because I have problems with the fit, and I always need some perfect fit shoes and something that's comfortable. Is there any place where they do a 3D scanning of fit?
Perfect question. And both from an aesthetic and a medical perspective, it's a valid one, because it's very important you have the right size and shape of shoes on your feet. There is no such service at this moment. However, with some smart technology, a 3D scanner and Shapeways, you could put together that business and do really well. We're happy to print it for you. I think one thing that needs to be taken into consideration is the materials. I know of a new material that has just come out that is really, really excellent for shoes. I'm not sure whether our supplier who's delivering it to us wants me to talk about it, so I'll keep it to me, but keep an eye on our blog. But you need a very special material that it is durable and comfortable to wear. And I think that has been the blocker up until now. materials is what it's all about in 3D printing, and having the right materials is going to enable this. Yep.
There's actually a person, I can't remember his name, on the West Coast that's now printing prosthetic limbs.
Yes. Scott Summit from
Summit, yeah.
Good evening. Thanks to all of our presenters here. It was excellent tonight. Frank, I have a question for you in regard to the demonstrations you were giving. Do you have asthma as a profile from among your topics?
Yes, asthma's on the list. We've looked at the NIH, have a comprehensive list under Medline Plus, and based on commonality, we're going down that list and trying to knock out as many diseases as we can. So, absolutely. Plus a lot of wellness problems, smoking, obesity, drinking, all that.
Excellent, thank you.
Sure.
Can you show obesity?
We can show the effects of obesity. So different body states and how that may interact with organ function.
That pathway there, okay, before and after.
Like the body eating a lot and then getting bigger? No, that's it is a good point. A lot of people ask us about building predictions into the body. So being able to simulate, if you do this, what happens? Can you predict what happens if you smoke for 5 years and watch the lungs deteriorate? Yeah, and there's two ways to do it. One is just to simply talk to the experts and visualize it. The other is to build mathematical models that would show that, which is obviously much more complicated. That's a good question.
Are you guys aware of some work at the MIT lab about 3D printing of organs for organ transplant? Both of you.
We've worked with MIT in the past along the lines of haptics. So when I showed you the force feedback simulators, but no, nothing about organ printing yet.
Peter, do you know anything about that?
I think it was a TED talk where someone printed a kidney. Yeah, and there's printing as an assembly technology is going to go in many places, including medical. It is already there. So I'm aware of it. There's multiple companies working on it. I didn't know about MIT specifically, to be honest. But it's not, Shapeways is consumer, and this is medical, so it's different fields.
Frank.
Sure.
Your product is probably the most amazing thing I've seen this year. I know it's only been 2 weeks, but it's unbelievable. Three questions. Two of them you probably already answered, but I wanted to hear again. One is, how many are you? Two is, how long have you guys been working on this? And then three is, where do you guys see yourselves in 20 years?
Okay. First two are easy. Yeah, no, good question. We are 14 people. We're in Soho. We've been providing services for a long time, and that platform I showed you is really our first initiative to build our own product. Third question.
20-year
vision. Yeah, on the beach drinking a margarita, that's helpful. No, we do. I mean, I think that like the boundaries of the body are really infinite. I mean, this work could go on forever. Even the modeling of the body can go into infinite detail. We can go to the cellular level and represent that. And like you said, we can build all these simulations. I think a big portion of our work going forward will be tapping into all these different sources of data so we can present that data in a really intuitive format. I touched on integrating that virtual body with electronic health records. So really allowing people to make sense of all that information that's being collected about themselves. Now, hopefully that won't take 20 years, but I think we'll be working on that for the next 5 at least. I did skip one of your questions. You asked how long it took us to build. I should mention we built the actual anatomy in collaboration with New York University. We know we needed domain experts lined up to authenticate, to make the anatomy itself very credible. So we formed a partnership with New York University, and they've played an integral role in validating the structure of the anatomy itself. It took about 6 years.
So we got a question back here.
Hi, this question is to the augmented reality fellow. And kind of touching on the question that the young lady had spoken about, I know that there's an augmented reality game, I think coming out for the PS Vita called Reality Fighters, I think something to that effect. I wanted to know if you had plans on expounding to different platforms that use camera technology besides the cell phone.
Yes, we do. We look at everything that is coming out that has a camera, a good processor, GPU, sensors, so you can create a more interesting experience, including the Vita platform by Sony. The real cool thing that is coming out, hopefully in the near future, is glasses that will allow you to overlay graphics on top of your field of view anywhere you go all the time, keeping your hands free. And I think that will be the big push for augmented reality because, you know, if it looks like sunglasses, if it's light, if it's affordable, then probably everybody's going to use it, and it will change the way we interact with everything in our world.
Another one back here.
Hi, I had two questions. One question for the Google Goggles presenter. I was wondering if you took a picture of the hat upside down, will the program recognize the hat in different orientations? And then the second question is for BioDigital. I really like the 3D animation, but I was wondering, how does your product differ from other 3D anatomy software programs and also surgical simulation programs? Thanks.
So for the first question, most of the backends that we query are rotation and scale invariant.
I think that means yes, it would recognize it if it's upside down. It's my job as a journalist to translate text, so it's...
So how does it differ from Anatomy Explorers? There are definitely other Anatomy Explorers out there. Ours is web-based, but from the beginning, we never intended to build an Anatomy Explorer. That's sort of how it's currently being used, but the anatomy was always supposed to be the framework to build other content upon, whether it's physiology, disease, and all those other animated states, and then open it up so it can be embedded within other systems. And your second question was about simulators? Yeah, so there's other companies that do virtual surgery, no question, and most build actually a lot more sophisticated simulators than ours, a lot of laparoscopic surgery. Our niche is really cognitive training, so not necessarily the force feedback that I showed you with the haptics, but cognitively understanding the tasks involved in a procedure. And we can do those in high volume at very low cost because we've developed this platform that allows us to put content into it very quickly. And there's a real need there because those other simulators can cost a couple $100,000, and we could fill this void at a very low, high volume cost.
So we got another question right back here.
Great, thank you all. First, two questions. First, Peter, I was wondering, presumably your economic model relies on some percentage of sales that the designers, of the products the designers are making, and is that sustainable as the cost for 3D printers comes down? I mean, I want one right now. If I'm missing that little part from IKEA and I don't want to go back to the store, I want to just upload the thing, print it. Is there some analog to Moore's Law that's going to bring that down so everyone's got a 3D printer? And then for either of the Google guys, Johan or Matt, I was just wondering how building cool stuff ports into monetization, and how that sort of internally within the company, to the extent that you can speak to that, how you feel pressured to build things that are, you know, that have a business case behind them versus just doing what you've wanted to do since you were 10.
So to answer your first question, what we do is we quote what it costs us to make designs products. And that's what the designer sees if he wants to open a shop. And then the designer decides what his markup is, whether it's 10 cents or maybe for free even, 10 cents, $1, $100. It's up to the designer. So in some cases, because we take a small percentage of the production cost, that's our revenue, that's where we make the money, the designer per item is making much, much more than we do. And we don't care because we want to scale this up and make it accessible for everybody. And that's also where the true power is of Shapeways. 3D printing is around for 20 years now. And it has been used for prototyping in aircraft, automobile, and high-end industries mainly. And it wasn't accessible for consumers because it was simply way too expensive. Now it's getting and becoming more accessible in two ways. One is the one that you pointed out through low-end machines that you can buy and have at home, and that is fine. The other is services like ours, where we make it really easy in multiple ways. We add different technologies, materials, but also uploading of files, because that's the making of the content is the hardest part, really. The printing is what the machine does, and we make that a lot easier as well. So there's two elements to that. We do believe that 3D printing will become a lot cheaper still, like half and again. So things become comparable in price, whether they're 3D printed or mass produced, and that's where it really gets interesting.
Follow up on the second question. So could give some of my own views on it, but also what you get communicated a lot at Google is sometimes we don't worry about it. We are told build good products and that are useful for users and get user adoption, and then the rest will come. So what happened in voice search is this makes searching by voice easy. It means you do more searches when you're on your phone, when you're out and about looking for a restaurant. And that can be monetized because it's a regular Google search. So I never, in a sense, try to say how I'm going to monetize. I try to build a better product. And that's still my mission today. It's try to build a better product. And the rest comes automatically.
And I think that is going to be it for our Q&A tonight, but I would invite you to stick around and approach people individually if you have questions.
Thanks to Rick and thanks to everybody tonight for a great show.
Thanks to Don. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, and we're going to cut it off here. I've been staring at that open bar all night from up here, so please help yourselves. If you would, fill out the surveys that we left you when you registered, and if you could leave your name tags on the way out, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, everybody.